Keir Starmer has suffered another humiliating setback, with Labour forced into yet another U-turn on its plans. GB News literally stopped everything for a breaking update that Keir Starmer suffered another humiliating U-turn. And watching Christopher Hope explain that digital ID cards are no longer mandatory after the Prime Minister spent months claiming they were essential to stop illegal immigration is like witnessing someone confidently announce they're building a house and then 3 months later saying, actually, a tent's fine too. Welcome back to UK Political Insight. And today, we're unpacking Labour's 13th, yes, 13th major policy reversal since taking power. Why digital ID cards going from absolutely mandatory to completely optional proves this government announces policies without thinking them through. And whether there's any coming back from being this spectacularly incompetent at the basic job of governing consistently. I'm bringing you multiple videos today because watching Starmer's government rack up U-turns faster than a driving instructor's nightmare student is both hilarious and deeply concerning for anyone who thinks governments should occasionally stick with decisions. So let's dive into what exactly changed with digital ID, why GB News viewers were so concerned it needed breaking news coverage, and whether Oscar Reddrop's right that this proves Starmer simply can't face difficult votes and caves every time something gets politically uncomfortable. Right. So the breaking news interrupting GB News programming shows how significant this reversal is considered by outlets following governmental dysfunction. Digital ID cards were announced by Starmer as compulsory scheme requiring every adult in UK to carry identification as part of efforts to tackle illegal immigration. That's specific, unambiguous policy statement. Compulsory means required. Every adult means everyone. Part of tackling illegal immigration means it's security measure. Those words have meanings you can't later pretend were different. Kemi calling it a gimmick that will do nothing to stop boats was accurate criticism. Digital ID for residents doesn't affect people arriving illegally by boats who aren't registering with authorities anyway. Illegal immigrants by definition aren't going through official channels where they need to present ID. So how does requiring citizens to carry ID cards stop illegal immigration? It doesn't, obviously, which is why it was always nonsensical as solution to boats. Nigel branding it cynical ploy to fool voters is equally valid. Announce tough-sounding measure, claim it addresses major concern, hope voters credit you for taking action without examining whether action actually solves problem. It's performative policy, designed for headlines, not results. And now it's been abandoned, proving it was never serious solution, just gimmick, as Badenoch said. The revelation that Starmer's U-turned on making digital ID mandatory is the key fact. From compulsory for everyone to optional by 2029 is complete reversal. Optional means people can choose not to get it. Compulsory meant everyone must have it. These are opposite policies. Pretending this is a refinement rather than a U-turn is gaslighting. Christopher Hope's response captures viewer concerns perfectly. GB News audience is generally skeptical of government overreach and protective of civil liberties. Mandatory ID cards represent state control and surveillance that doesn't sit well with British liberty traditions. His question, what was the point, is exactly right, because if it's now optional, what was the justification for ever making it mandatory? His explanation of what's changing is important. From 2029, you can get job but must present some form of ID. That can be passport with chip. They want to make right-to-work checks mandatory by 2029. That's completely different from mandatory digital ID cards. Right-to-work verification using various documents is a continuation of existing system. Mandatory digital ID was a new requirement for everyone, regardless of employment. Those are fundamentally different policies. The statement that digital ID will make life easier, ensuring public services are more personal, joined up, and effective, is the sales pitch for voluntary adoption. If it's genuinely convenient and beneficial, people will opt in without compulsion. That's fine, but it undermines the entire justification for making it mandatory. If you're now saying it's optional and beneficial, why did you ever propose forcing everyone to have it? Hope's point about the 2 to 3 million people not being on the internet having to prove who they are with a card being deeply offensive, particularly to the wartime generation, captures the civil liberties concern. Requiring elderly people who don't use the internet to carry government-issued ID to prove who they are is treating citizens like suspects. That generation fought for freedoms that mandatory ID undermines. Forcing them to carry papers would be particularly galling given what they sacrificed for liberty. Ellie Costello noting this comes after series of protests shows public pressure worked. People objected, made noise, demonstrated opposition, and government backed down. That's democracy functioning as it should. But it also shows government didn't anticipate opposition, didn't consult adequately, announced a policy without building support. If they'd done proper groundwork, protests wouldn't have been necessary because concerns would have been addressed beforehand. Her statement that digital IDs will now be optional by 2029 is the complete opposite of the original announcement. Optional versus mandatory isn't shades of gray, it's black versus white. The policy has been fundamentally reversed regardless of governmental spin claiming otherwise. Oscar Reddrop describing this as a huge victory for people and their personal freedom is correct framing. When government proposes authoritarian measure and public pushback forces a reversal, that's freedom being defended successfully. People exercise their voice. The government was forced to listen. That's how it should work, but only works when people actually push back rather than accepting whatever they're told. His claim it was never about illegal immigration is devastating, because it's obviously true. Digital ID for residents doesn't stop boats. It never could have. So why was it announced as an immigration measure? Because immigration is a hot political issue and attaching unrelated policies to it makes them sound important and urgent. It's cynical politics that Farage correctly identified and that Reddrop's now highlighting. The statement that this is Starmer's 13th major U-turn is the truly damning number. 13 times the government has announced policies, then reversed them. 13 times they've shown they either don't think things through before announcing or don't have the courage to implement when challenged. 13 times they've proven their word is worthless because they'll change course whenever politically convenient. Calling it complete screeching U-turn rather than policy refinement is accurate language that cuts through spin. This isn't adjustments based on new information. This is abandoning an entire policy because it proved unpopular. Screeching implies sudden, violent reversal, which captures the reality better than gentle language about listening to stakeholders. Oscar Reddrop's claim Starmer can't face difficult votes is pattern recognition. Disability benefits cuts abandoned when MPs threatened to rebel. Farm tax changes watered down after protests. Business rates for pubs reversed after backlash. Winter fuel payments partially walked back. Now digital ID made optional. Each time government announces something controversial, faces opposition, and reverses. That's not responsive governance. That's cowardice. His accusation that those at number 10 got it very wrong is broader than just this policy. The fundamental problem is governmental process. They're not properly developing policies before announcement. They're not anticipating opposition and building support. They're not thinking through implementation challenges. They're announcing things for political effect, then scrambling to reverse when reality hits. That's incompetence at the highest level. The context of countless U-turns overshadowing Starmer's time in office is the real story. This isn't about digital ID specifically, it's about a pattern of failure. Business rate relief for pubs scrapped, then restored. Farmland inheritance tax announced, then watered down. Winter fuel payments implemented, then partially reversed. Each one individually might be defensible. Collectively, they show a government that has no idea what it's doing. The breaking news treatment from GB News reflects how these U-turns have become a story in themselves. It's not just that policy changed, it's that this government's defining characteristic is changing policies. Each reversal is news because it confirms the pattern. Viewers expect U-turns now. They're just waiting to see which policy gets abandoned next. The illegal immigration framing is particularly cynical because it's exploiting genuine public concern for political cover. People want action on boats. Government announces digital ID as a solution. People who care about immigration support it without examining whether it actually helps. Then it gets reversed and immigration problem remains unsolved, proving it was never a real solution. That's betraying voters who care about immigration by offering fake solutions. The wartime generation reference is emotionally powerful because it connects to values and sacrifice. People who fought fascism and defended freedom being told they must carry government-issued ID papers is symbolically offensive in ways that go beyond practical inconvenience. It's asking them to accept the kind of state control they fought against. That generational perspective is important, and Hope's right to highlight it. The 2 to 3 million not on the internet is a significant number that shows digital-first policies exclude substantial population. Elderly people, rural residents with poor connectivity, poor people who can't afford devices or service all get left behind by digital systems. Optional digital ID with alternatives is fine. Mandatory digital-only ID is exclusionary and discriminatory against demographics already marginalized. The 2029 timeline is interesting because it's years away. Announcing a policy for implementation in 5 years gives lots of time for further changes, different government, complete abandonment. It's not serious near-term commitment. It's vague future intention that might never happen. That makes the mandatory to optional reversal even more pointless because nothing's being implemented anyway. The personal, joined-up, and effective public services pitch is the benefits case for voluntary adoption. If digital ID genuinely delivers those benefits,